we are going to discuss about place of supply in GST. The concept place of supply of goods is having a great role in GST. And this concept place of supply is relevant in both supply of services and also in the supply of goods. So we use this place of supply to know the tax that is to be levied. We have different types of tax like integrated goods service and taxes, central goods and service taxes, state goods and service taxes, union territory goods and service taxes, etc. So, which tax is to be levied will depend upon whether a particular transaction is an interstate supply or an intrastate supply. So we have to understand whether it is an interstate supply or an intrastate supply. So to understand whether it is an intrastate supply or an intrastate supply, we need to understand the place of supply. So only by understanding the place of supply, we can determine whether it is an interstate supply or an intrastate supply. So the purpose of place of supply in GST is being discussed here. Before starting, we need to understand what is the purpose of this place of supply. In the case of cross-border transaction, we need this place of supply to determine whether the tax is to be levied on a particular transaction or not. So in the case of cross-border transaction, we need this place of supply to know whether the tax is levied on a particular transaction. And in the case of domestic transaction, we need this place of supply to understand the transaction whether it is an interstate supply or an intrastate supply. So that is the purpose of the place of supply in GST. So in the case of both cross-border transaction and also in the case of domestic transaction, we need this place of supply. So we have to understand what is this interstate supply and intrastate supply. In intrastate supply, we can say that the location of supplier and the place of supply is in different states or in different union territory, and that is known as interstate supply. So if the location of the supplier is in one state and the place of supply is in another state, then we can say that it is an example of interstate supply. The next one is intrastate supply. In intrastate supply, the location of the supplier and the place of supply will be in the same state itself or in the same union territory itself. That is known as intrastate supply. That is both the location and the place of supply is in the same state, is within the state or within the union territory. Then we can say that it is an intrastate supply. So that is the difference between interstate supply and intrastate supply. In intrastate supply, both the location and place is in the same state, whereas in interstate supply, both the location and the place of supply is in different states. First of all, we are going to discuss about the place of supply of goods. So depending upon the nature of supply, there will be changes in the place of supply. So we need to know about each situations in which places is the location of supply taking place. So the first case is where the supply involves movement of goods, whether by supplier or recipient or by any other person. So if the supply involves movement of goods, that is there is movement of goods taking place, then the place of supply will be the location of goods at the time at which the movement of goods terminates for delivery to the recipient. So if there is a movement of goods, the place of supply will be the place where the goods terminates for delivery to the recipient. So that is the place of supply when there is movement of goods. So that is the first case. The second case is where the goods are delivered to the recipient or any person on the direction of the third person by way of transfer of title or otherwise, it shall be deemed that the third person has received the goods. The second case is when this goods is delivered to the recipient through a third person. In such cases, the place of supply will be the principal place business of such person. So the location, the place of supply when the goods is delivered to the recipient through a third person, then the place of supply will be the principal place business of that person. The next case is when there is no movement of goods either by supplier or recipient. So the third case is when there is no movement of goods. In such cases, the place of supply will be the location of such goods at the time of delivery to the recipient. So when there is no movement of goods, the place of supply will be the location at which the goods is delivered to the recipient. So that is about the third case. Fourth case is when the goods are assembled or installed at site. Certain goods will be assembled or installed at the particular site. In such cases, the place of supply will be the place where the goods are assembled or installed. So that is the fourth case when the goods is installed or assembled in a particular site. Then in such cases, the place where the goods is assembled will be the place of supply. The next one is when the goods are supplied on board a conveyance like vessel, aircraft, train or motor vehicle. So when the goods is supplied on board, the place of supply will be the place where such goods are taken on board. So the place in which this goods is taken on board will be the place of supply. The next case is when the place of supply of goods cannot be determined. When it is difficult to determine the place of supply, then in such cases, the place of supply will be determined in such a manner that is prescribed by the law. So when the supply of goods, the place of supply of goods cannot be determined, it will be determined based on the law and which is written by law. Next, we are going to discuss about the place of supply of goods in the case of imports and exports. So in the case of import, the place of supply will be the location of the importer. The person who imports will be the place of such importer will be the place of supply. Then in the case of exporter, the place of supply will be the location that is outside India. So that is about place of supply of goods in the case of imports and exports. Now we are going to discuss about the place of supply of the services. So in the case of services, if the services is supplied to a registered person, then the place of supply will be the location of that registered person. And if the services is supplied to any other persons other than the registered person, in such cases, the location of the recipient, the person who receives the service, will be the place of supply. And if it is not specified, then the location of the supplier will be considered as the place of supply. So if it is a registered person, the location of the registered person will be the location and that will be the place of supply. And if it is supplied to any other persons other than the registered person, then the location of the recipient will be the location, will be the place of supply, or otherwise the location of the supplier will be the place of supply. Again, the place of supply will be changing according to the nature of supply. Now we are going to discuss about the places of supply of services in different situation. The first situation is immovable property related services like hotel accommodation, etc. So if the service is an immovable property related service, the place of supply will be the location at which this immovable property is located or intended to be located. And if it is located outside India, the place of supply will be the location of the recipient. So in the case of immovable property related services, the place of supply will be the location at which this immovable property is located or it is intended to be located. And if it is located outside India, the location of the recipient will be considered as the place of supply. So that is about the first case, that is the service that is related to immovable property. The second case is if it is a restaurant and catering services or a personal grooming or fitness, beauty treatment or health related service. So in such cases, the place of supply will be the location where the service is actually performed. So in the case of restaurant and catering services, beauty treatment, health services, the place of supply will be the location where the service is actually performed. That is the second case. Third case is about training and performance appraisal. So in the case of training and performance appraisal, the place of supply differs according to the connection between the supplier and the recipient. So if it is a B2B connection, that is business to business connection, then the place of supply will be the location of such a registered person. And if it is a business to consumer or customer connection, the location where the service is actually performed will be the place of supply. So in the case of training and performance appraisal, if it is B2B, then the place of supply will be the location of such a registered person. And if it is B2C, then the location where the service is actually performed will be the place of supply. The next case is admission to an event or amusement park. So if it is a service relating to the admission to an event or an amusement park, the place of supply will be the place where the event is actually held. If it is an amusement park, that amusement park, the place where this amusement park located, that would be the place of supply. So in the case of admission to an event or an amusement park, the place where the event actually held will be the place of supply. And if it is an amusement park, the place where this park is located will be the place of supply. The next case, that is organization of an event. If it is an organization of an event, again that can be categorized to two categories. That is, if it is B2B connection, then the place of supply will be the location of that registered person. And if it is B2C connection, the place of supply will be the location where that event actually is held. And if it is held outside India, the place of supply will be the location of the recipient. So that is about organization of an event. If it is B2B, the location of that registered person will be the place of supply. And if it is B2C, the location where that event is held will be the place of supply. And if it is outside India, the location of the recipient will be considered as the place of supply. The next case is transportation of goods, including mails. Again, this also can be categorized into two. If it is B2B, the location of that registered person will be the place of supply. And if it is B2C, the location at which the goods is handed over will be considered as the place of supply. So in the case of transportation of goods, if it is B2B, the place of supply will be the location of that registered person, and if it is B2C, the location at which the goods is handed over will be the place of supply. In the next case, that is about passenger transportation. If it is passenger transportation, again it can be categorized into two. If it is B2B, the place of supply will be the location of that registered person. And if it is B2C, the place where the passenger embarks on the conveyance for a continuous journey. So, in the case of B2C, the place where the passenger decides to continue his journey will be the place of supply. The next case is the services on board. So, if the services is on board, the place of supply will be the location of the first scheduled point of departure. So, the first scheduled point of departure will be considered as the place of supply in the cases of services on board. The next one is in the case of banking and other financial services, the place of supply will be the location of the recipient of service on the records of the supplier location. If the supplier of services, if the location of the recipient of service is not available. In the case of banking and financial services, the place of supply will be the location of the recipient of service. And if the location of the recipient is not available, then the place of supply will be the location of the supplier. So usually it is the location of the recipient, and if that is not available, then the place of supply will be location of the supplier. Then in the case of insurance services, that is also categorized into two. If it is B2B, the place of supply will be the location of that registered person. And if it is B2C, it will be the location of the recipient. And in the case of advertisement service to the government, in such cases, the place of supply will be taken as located in each of state proportionate value in case of multiple supplier. So, in the case of advertisement service that is given to government, the place of supply will be based on the location of each state, and if there is multiple supplier, it will be proportionately divided among. So that is about advertisement services to government. The next one is telecommunication service, and the place of supply depends upon the type of telecommunication service. Like if the service is involving fixed line circuits, dish, etc. In such cases, the place of supply is located of such fixed equipment. So the place where that equipment is there, that would be the place of supply. And in the case of mobile internet postpaid services, the location of the billing address of the recipient will be the place of supply. And in the case of sale of prepaid vouchers, the place of supply will be the place of that voucher. So in all other cases, the address of the recipient will be the place of supply. So it depends upon the what kind of telecommunication service is given. Then we are going to discuss about the place of supply of services in case of cross-border supplies. So in the case of cross-border supplies also we have various situations. If the service is supplied for goods that are required to be made physically available from a remote location by way of electronic means. So if the services that is supplied for the goods and that is to be physically available from a remote location, then the place of supply will be the location where the service is actually performed. So the location, in such cases, the location will be the services, the place where the services is actually performed. The next case is when the service is supplied to an individual and they are required for the physical presence of the receiver. So if the physical presence of the receiver is needed, in such cases, the place of supply will be the services, will be the place in which the service is actually performed. So the services that is applied to an individual, and if their physical presence is needed, then the place of supply will be the location where the service is actually performed. The next case is immovable property related services like hotel accommodation. In such cases, the location at which this immovable property is located will be the place of supply. The next one is admission to the event or organization of an event. And in such cases, the place of supply will be the place in which this event is going to happen or in which this event is actually located. Then, if the set three services, that is goods and individual related, immovable property related, and event related, in these three situations, the place of supply will be accordingly. We are having three cases. So in the case of goods and individual related, and also in the immovable property related, event related. About these three services, we are going to explain now. In these three services is held at more than one location, including a location in the taxable territory. In these three services, if the service is given at more than one location, then the place of supply will be the location in the taxable territory where the greatest proportion of the service is provided. So, if these three kinds of service is given in more than one location, including in which one location is said to be taxable territory, in such cases, the place of supply will be the location in the taxable territory. The second one is, if these three services is held in more than one state, in such cases, if it is held in more than one state, then the place of supply will be in such state in proportion to the value of services provided in each state. So, if these services held in more than one state, the state in which more value of service is provided, that would be the place of supply. The next category that we are going to discuss is about banking financial services like NBFC, intermediary services, or hiring of vehicle services, etc. In such cases, the place of supply will be the location of the supplier of the service. So, the location of the supplier will be the place of supply. Then, in the transportation of goods, if it is a service relating to transporting goods, then the place of destination of the goods will be the place of supply. Then in the case of passenger transportation, the place where the passenger continues his journey, starts to continue his journey, will be the place of supply. Then in the case of services on board, the first scheduled point of departure will be the place of supply. Then in the services relating to online information and database access or retrieval services, the location of the recipient will be the place of supply. So, these are the details about place of supply in GST. We discussed about the place of supply of goods and also the place of supply in services. Thank you.